to our honorable legislators and their staff. Please watch the short Fishing for Freedom video. This video will prove to you that for the last 10 years, the FWC have lied to you about the commercial viability of nets provided the commercial fishing industry to make a living with, and furthermore, lied to you about the constitutional due process available through the court system. Let us start you out with a statement made by Chief Judge Edwin Browning Jr., the first DCA, to the FWC. Then we'll cover the nets, and then we'll cover the due process.
Well, let me ask you this, Counselor. Can your commission just do anything and we have no supervision over it, even if it's totally unreasonable?
For years, the FWC have told you that they provided the fishing industry with nets that are commercially viable. Through the threat of an FWC investigation, House Speaker Bentz forced the FWC to test the nets against our claims. Those tests proved that the FWC mandated nets result in 98% waste. Now listen to the FWC's attorney, Jonathan Glogow, admit that he and the FWC knew they lied for 10 years.
The information that was gleaned from those tests was exactly what the agency expected. They knew that the 3-inch net would gill legal-sized fish, and they knew that the 2-inch net was going to gill undersized fish.
The tested 3-inch mesh net caught 97% marketable fish and no illegal fish, while the FWC's 2-inch mesh net caught 98% illegal juvenile fish. So now you know the FWC knowingly lied to you and to the courts for 10 years about the viability of their mandated 2-inch mesh net.
It is not economically reasonable for a fisherman to go out there and whack the undersized fish. They're not going to do that.
Really? So what alternative has the FWC offered? None. Pay close attention.
The rule does not require the use of a 2-inch net. 2 inches is the maximum. If they're gilling undersized fish and making it uneconomical for fishermen to use a 2-inch net, they can reconfigure their net. They can use smaller mesh size. As we say in our brief, in Texas, they limit them to 1 inch. Not 2 inch, but 1 inch.
So how viable is a 1-inch mesh net? Listen to the FWC's own fishery expert, Mr. Gil McRae.
Your opinions on that? Well, certainly the relationship between mesh size and bycatch holds. As you decrease mesh size, you'll catch more of what you're not trying to catch because it's less selective, right? So we said earlier that a 2-inch mesh net is less selective than a 3-inch mesh net. It catches things other than what you're targeting. So those relationships would hold if you reduced the mesh size further. A smaller mesh net would be less selective even than the 2-inch. So you would catch a number of things you're not trying to catch. Now the other issue is the net would also become less viable as a commercial gear, even less viable than the 2-inch mesh because it's not selective.
The FWC is knowingly selling our commercial fishermen licenses, then forcing them to use gear that they know will never catch legal-sized fish, under an amendment whose only purpose was to prevent unnecessary killing, overharvest, and waste. For 10 years, the FWC staff lied to our legislators that they couldn't fix the net problem. We want you to hear for yourself the truth from the FWC's own mouth. Ex-Miami Dolphin and FWC Commissioner Dwight Stevenson questions whether or not the FWC can legally change the mesh size of nets. Listen to head FWC Commissioner Barreto's answer.
Do we have the right to change from 2 to 3 legally? That seems as though that would solve.
The answer is yes. Legally, we can move that mesh size from 2 inches to 3 inches. Absolutely, we have the authority to do that. Okay, we have that authority. We can move to 4 inches if we want.
That settles the FWC staff's lies to many of our elected lawmakers that the FWC could not fix the net problem. Despite the tremendous suffering our community has endured under a decade of corrupt FWC rule, this is the attitude and priorities of FWC Commissioner Barreto.
It is what it is, and we need to move on. There's so many great and bigger issues that we need to be dealing with this agency.
Really? Like what?
Manatees, with respect to listing process, with respect to, and I could just name them on and on.
FWC Commissioners Kathy Barco and ex-Miami Dolphin Hall of Fame Senator Dwight Stevenson get it. Listen to Commissioner Stevenson.
Try to make it work so that, everybody wins here. I mean, the resource could win. I mean, if there's that much killing going on and byproduct, that we're losing out on from the 2-inch mesh versus a 3-inch mesh, or then we got people, their livelihood is, they're able to make a living, they're able to pay their light bills and water bills and house bills.
The answer is no. The FWC are forcing otherwise honest citizens in small coastal communities with no other means to make a living to become criminals in order to survive. On top of that, the FWC secured huge civil fines against fishermen from the legislature in exchange for fixing the net problem 5 years ago. They lied. Need proof? Ask ex-Representative Will Kendrick, ex-chair of the House Natural Resources Committee. Kendricks testified to this fact before a legislative delegation in the Panhandle in late February of '09. What about the courts? Here's your proof that the FWC is knowingly lying to you about substantive constitutional due process. Since there are no draw-out hearings for our issues, the FWC have lied to the legislature for a decade about there being adequate due process available through the courts. When we get to court on an issue as clear as the 2-inch mesh, the FWC then claims that we have no right to challenge them in court. Listen for yourself.
It is a question here of where we draw the line in the courts as to whether a rational basis is presented or not.
And it's not for the court to debate the wisdom of the legislative determination, or in this case, quasi-legislative determination.
Well, let me ask you this, Counselor. Can your commission just do anything and we have no supervision over it, even if it's totally unreasonable?
Precisely. Does that sound like we have substantive constitutional due process to you? There's no executive, legislative, or judicial separation of powers. The FWC is killing our environment, economy, constitution, and most importantly, our citizens. We have 3 wishes. That the Senate Select Committee requests the FWC to keep their promise of 5 years ago to allow larger mesh nets in order to protect the environment, economy, and citizens. 2. Summon ex-Representative Mitch Needleman to testify about the complete lack of substantive constitutional due process for those who live under FWC rule. And 3. Launch an mpg investigation upon the FWC. We have overwhelming evidence of corruption and intentional deprivation of citizens' constitutional protections. You will find our witnesses impeccable, our proof irrefutable, and the existence of the completely autonomous FWC unacceptable in the United States of America. Please investigate our claims and stop the abuse of your constituents. For more information, please contact David Grix, Vice President of Fishing for Freedom. Every official in the state of Florida has sworn to uphold the United States and Florida Constitution, including the constitutional protections of its citizens. Please help.